Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Mr. Rob Waugh. Did I nail that or not?
That was pretty good. It's a hard one to say, and I think you nailed it.
It's not Waugh for those, Americans in the room listening here. Waugh. Rob has been in the game for almost 30 years. He's a journalist, editor, freelancer now. He's been, all over the place. Started PlayStation Plus magazine, Stuff magazine, wrote for Associated newspaper publication for a long time, Mail on Sunday, Daily Mail. Now he's virtually everywhere. I kind of came across his work in the Press Gazette, but he's been really kind of, I feel like, uniquely placed in this industry, the digital PR space, at least for us, in that he has, such a long career as a journalist, but now he's digging into some of these bigger themes and problems and issues that I think are impacting the digital PR landscape, which is where most of our listeners are situated. So we're going to be talking all about kind of these issues, but also digging into kind of what it means to be a freelancer and if I can needle him on some best practices and that sort of thing. But before we do get into that, I just want to remind people to like and subscribe. The more you interact with this stuff, the more I can have great guests on like Rob. Second quick reminder is to check out List IQ, our AI-powered media list building tool that helps you build lists, relevant, targeted lists right from Google News in a fraction of the time. So check it out. It's free to download, and we'd love to hear what people think. So that's it for my intro spiel. Rob, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. We've been chatting over the last couple of months around this whole fake experts thing, so it's nice to be on here.
Yeah. I mean, we can start there maybe. I think the thing that I'd love to just kind of get your take on, having, like I said in the intro, having been in this business for as long as you have, is any of this stuff we're seeing new, or is it just kind of flavors of the same, repeated in different ways?
I think a lot of this is actually new. I mean, fake experts are not a new thing. But the industrial scale which they're being deployed at the moment, and they're used by sort of very unscrupulous organizations who are creating personas which are then landing hundreds and hundreds of pieces in the media, and these people are completely fake. I think that's certainly happening now on a scale that's never been seen before.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess a follow-up question to that would be, like, clearly this is AI driven, right? Like, that's the reason that we're seeing this being pushed at such a massive scale. Are there benefits that you are seeing from AI in the media landscape, or is this all kind of negatives at this point? Because that's what it seems like on my end.
I mean, I think that, I think that for a lot of organizations, the key question is stuff like AI overviews and AI cannibalizing search, which is threatening the business model for a lot of publications, including really established ones. But it's smaller publishers. It's a life and death matter. And so, but I would say that, and obviously this, the scale of the fake experts thing is meaning that, journalists in boxes are being submerged in extremely low quality pitches featuring people that aren't real, and from organizations that are sending dozens or even hundreds a day. So that's on the negative side. I'd say on the positive side, I'm actually writing a piece this week on how journalists are using AI to do research, and it's I find it an extremely powerful tool for, because as you mentioned, I will write for anybody with a checkbook, and that means that sometimes you are writing about highly technical topics which you might never have looked at before, and AI is extremely good at bringing you up to speed on that. It's also, I mean, it's surprisingly great at stuff like analyzing like company tax returns and company business records that are public. In fact, I spoke to a very, very famous investigative financial journalist trying to spot some irregularities in a company accounts, and he said to me, "I just asked ChatGPT; it's great at it."
See, that's where I get a little caught up with some of this stuff, because I am concerned. Like, my bigger concern is the misinformation kind of thing where, you end up spreading the hallucination, right? The aspect of where they tend to fill in the blanks when they don't know. And they are getting better, it seems. But, to me at least, I feel like every couple days, it's like my AI is, not to anthropomorphize it, but it's like a tired, like a teenager or something where you're like, you're like, did you not get enough sleep last night? You're giving me lazy answers, it's just like
There,
hit or miss. And I worry about that kind of stuff where all it takes is, a journalist or researcher or whomever to not do the due diligence, right? To lean maybe too heavily one time on
yeah,
AI, and you're spreading clear misinformation.
I agree with that. And it's just a question of, I mean, I'm not one of those guys who, I don't know if you are, who anthropomorphizes AI in any way. I mean, I talk to it like it's just a tech tool. I don't like have a
Hmm.
conversation with it. I'm like,
Right,
provide this with links. And
right.
I think that you just have to be disciplined about how you use it because, like you say, there's certain specific searches where you just think, Jesus Christ, this is terrible. Like, I mean, to take a frivolous example, I'm a helpless addict of the game Diablo 4. And if you ask ChatGPT or any of the bots for up-to-date information on like, how do I optimize this item or whatever, it's terrible because it does not understand that video games change all the time. So only information for the last month is
Right,
relevant.
right.
And so that's just, I mean, that's just one of the weaknesses of AI. I think it's very good to be able to move beyond that sort of standard 10 Google search results and get something that is more interactive. But yeah, you just have to be aware of the limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Do you, and I'm assuming the answer is going to be no, but I mean, do you think that journalists are getting ideas from AI, like ideas for stories, or is most of the stuff coming from pitches these days or internal kind of, their own work?
I mean, I think that, for instance, if you file to a publication regularly and you write a certain kind of article that's quite predictable, if you chuck 10 of those headlines into ChatGPT and go, make me 20 more suggestions,
Right, right.
it's actually quite a useful tool for coming up with those. Because, I mean, so, I mean, quite a bit of it comes from pitches. Look, so I write. I have several clients who I write for weekly, and this week I write for Yahoo News, and this week 2 out of the 3 came from pitches from people I'd been talking to during the week. They were like, "Okay, I've got this interesting cybersecurity idea," and I was like, "Okay, that'll, I'll buy that for $1." And I pitched that in, and then the other one I just came up with off the top of my head. But if I'm like sitting there thinking, oh my God, it's Monday morning again and I need to come up with more pitches, then ChatGPT, if you're writing on fairly predictable topics, it's quite a reasonable way. I'm not all, like maybe 1 in 5 ideas is good, or it just leads you down a path where
Right.
you get to something
Well,
where you
yeah.
think you're not going to just copy and paste them in and go, yeah, how'd you like that, commissioning editor?
Right, right.
Because I think
Yeah,
people can smell that.
right, which I think is kind of a lot of the issues that you wrote about, not the expert commentary, but the kind of AI generated press releases. And that seems to be another kind of plague on the industry right now, or just AI generated pitches in general, right? Like journalists can seemingly smell them out pretty easily.
It's just obvious. And also, I mean, I do think, journalists can get on high horses about stuff. Oh, don't bombard me with this. And it's like, well, no, actually, it is kind of relevant to your industry and stuff. But when you see these ones that were generated by this AI tool, it's just so low quality and it's so obviously AI. Like it has weird formatting. Like there's suddenly like it breaks out into like a bolded list of bullet points in the middle of it. You're like, no human would ever do that. And it has that weird American thing where all the subheads are capitalized, which is
Mm,
like really, really common in the US. But I mean, when I've been on staff on digital publications and I see reporters doing that, I'm just like, do not do that. That is American. We do not do that here. And so, yeah, I mean, those things, and they're just so obviously low quality. And, I spoke to several journalists who were saying that on the Times and the Sun, being targeted by a particular organization who was constantly changing email domains, making up new addresses for fictional PRs just to spam out more and more stuff. They were saying that they'd been talking to IT to try and
Wow.
block uh, the stuff coming from, because it makes your email inbox unusable. I mean, it's particularly bad if you're a generalist, as a journalist. If you are working on, like, let's say, just data centers or something like that, the pitches that you get are generally at least relevant to that industry. But the problem is that if you're working on a publication that, let's say, covers film, travel, TV, and a whole
Right.
bunch of other stuff, you already probably get several hundred emails a day.
Yeah.
And then with this automated stuff on top, it's like it's getting to a level where it's it's just out of control.
Yeah, I mean, do you think the answer is some type of, you're talking about the IT departments putting in some type of like filtering? Like I've heard the pushback even on some of your reporting and the Press Gazette reporting where it's like, well, some of the press releases that I'm putting out, I know I'm writing, but like they show up as being AI generated when I look, but I've definitely written them like myself, like what is there an answer? I mean, other than just kind of this advocacy to stick
I
to
think the
better.
answer is
Yeah.
that the stuff that's extremely low quality tends to arrive all in one email. It's like it's pasted into the body of the text because they just want to have as many people reading it immediately as possible. I mean, I'd say that short pitches where you go, I've got X person available for interview, or we've got research that says this, is actually paradoxically more likely to land
Yeah.
because
Interesting.
people see it as real.
Right.
Like, you know,
And I could tell you actually doing some analyzing our data of our users. And one of the things we saw is that the UK based teams do tend to do that approach where you are basically like pasting within the email pitch, pasting in the full press release.
yeah,
Whereas the US based PR teams don't seem to do that at all. That is interesting to me to hear you say that. Like, that might be a way to differentiate because it does seem to be a very UK specific thing. And that's something I'm trying to dig into more and more just to understand the differences between the markets and how they act. And maybe probably a good segue into asking you what other differences you do see between the UK and US markets. I mean, you mentioned the titles, the capitalized subheaders, but just, in general, like the media, the space problems, like are there differences you're seeing?
oh, there's huge differences. I think that, in the UK, a lot of these guys who are firing out fake experts, a lot of these guys, they're coming from outside of the US and Western Europe. So, they're coming from East European countries. In the past, they've often used African content writers, and that's now been replaced with ChatGPT because it's cheaper. These guys are sort of black hat SEO guys who are targeting publications where they think they can get links by coming up with fake experts and dubious research. And I think that one of the key differences between the US and the UK is that UK publications have become a bit of a soft underbelly because a lot of them are running quite, I describe low quality content where it is like gardening tips and, or viral tips on how to clean your house. There's one hack will make your kitchen sparkle forever or whatever. All this stuff, which is, I mean, it's pretty crap content. But if they are coming up with fake experts and delivering that content because they know that that's a reliable pipeline to get links. And I would say that in the US, there is still a lot more resistance to that kind of stuff. There's still checks and balances in place that have been got rid of in the UK. But the one thing I would say is that from my experience of freelancing is that there are a lot of UK journalists now moving over into the US.
Oh, interesting.
They're bringing that sort of tabloid UK mentality to it a bit, and I do wonder if US publications might end up being more vulnerable in the future. But I mean, I think that also there should be a caveat around that. In that, as I said, we're in a time of absolutely seismic change in the industry, so there's a shift towards models, financial models that don't really reward that kind of content. So if everyone's retreating behind a paywall, then that, the viral cleaning hacks, they're not going to land because, no one's going to go behind a paywall for a tip, which always seems to involve vinegar or bicarbonate of soda for how to clean things in your house.
Yeah, yeah. My wife and I joke about that all the time. Lemon too. You got to add lemon in there. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so I want to switch a little bit now to kind of coming up with stories. I'd love to know how you went down. Let's start with the expert commentary thing, because it's fresh in everybody's mind. And how do you come up with a story idea like that? Where did that come from? Was that pitched to you? It seems like you had a lot of other people involved, giving you quotes and stuff. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the weird thing was, it was like about a year before I filed that story. I was doing some content writing for a marketing agency in Barcelona, and we got pitched this guest blogger. And I was like, this is weird. Because I looked at her and I was just like, you are not real. The guy who we were working with, this guy, he's pretty old, and he was going, what do you mean she's not real? I was like, this person is not real. We should not have a blog from her. It doesn't matter. And so we dropped it. I didn't think too much about it. And then a year later, I was writing for the Telegraph, which for the listeners in the US, it's quite a respectable British newspaper. It's sort of quite right wing, older readership, and very, very respected. And basically, I asked for advice on the psychological impact of identity theft via a response platform. And this psychiatrist replied, and the weird thing was it had those capitalized subheads that I hate. And I was like, this is weird. Like, who writes like that? And anyway, and then I looked at her because the reason that I kind of looked into her profile, because I naively thought that places like Response Source would be checking that people are actually real, but they're not. Well, they are now more so. But anyway, the reason I looked into her was that the Telegraph, the only listed place of work for her was a sex shop. And I was like, I cannot credit a sex shop in the Telegraph. There's some sort of old colonel is going to have a heart attack into his breakfast. And I was like, right, okay, I can't do that. So I have to find, where's her practice? Because, she's a psychiatrist. You got to be able to book her, right? And people have to make money. It's like not everybody uses LinkedIn, not everybody uses Instagram. But if you're a psychiatrist, there has to be a way to find you. Otherwise, you can't make money. And there was no way to find her. And I was like, this is weird. So at that point, I flagged it to the network. And I said, because I noticed a couple of similar profiles. And I was like, these guys are writing using AI and they don't exist. And they said, and I got a message back from them, and they said, oh, we've given them a final warning. And I was like, final warning? Why haven't you just kicked them off? That's not a final warning type scenario. It's a person who doesn't exist writing copy using AI. That shouldn't even be happening. And so at that point, that annoyed me so much that I just thought I'm going to pitch this as a story. I worked for Dominic on some other tech stories, and he was like, okay, this is great. And I actually didn't do it for a couple of months. And then I spotted another one, and we sort of got the whole story rolling at that point. The psychiatrist Barbara Santini, is actually operated by one guy in Kenya and two Lithuanian guys who run the sex shop and a couple of other sites. One of them's a solicitor and was issuing very, very convincing legal threats, saying that if we say that Barbara Santini doesn't exist, we'll be sued. And and so it was all quite alarming. But thankfully, in Dominic Punsford, I've got a very brave editor there, and he just pushed the button on it. And
Yeah.
obviously, the legal letters did not arrive. And we're like, right, okay, they don't exist. And then once we started pulling on it, you realize there was a lot of that out there. And I mean, to date, we've found well over 1,000 expert-led articles in the UK press that have featured advice from people who.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to see it more. I think I saw Ars Technica on the Press Gazette today. I don't know if you wrote that. I just literally just saw the headline. So they pulled off something. I
Yeah,
think it was Ars Technica.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that is an interesting thing. I mean, kind of concerning hearing about, legal threats and that sort of thing. Is it the first time you've gotten that sort of thing from a story?
No, no. Yeah, no, Monday, I used to, before, because the thing is, what young journalists don't realize is it was so much worse before newspapers had websites, because when newspapers all got websites, all anyone wants now is they want you to change the copy online, because that's going to be what stays there. Whereas before there was the website, when I worked on a Sunday newspaper, Monday morning used to just be people screaming at you and legal threats because they about what you'd run the day before, and you couldn't change it. There was no button to go back and rewind. Whereas now, all that happens is they just want it. They want a correction, or they want you to amend the piece. So it was a lot scarier back then, because you're like, oh my god, yeah, you just like
Once it's written, it's out there. Yeah, right.
once it's written,
Yeah.
you cannot bring it back. I mean,
Well, there's something kind of like romantic is probably not the right word, but like this idea of just kind of like the older school journalism where it was like you would write it, there's paper, people read the paper, like these were the only sources you'd get the news. But I think there's probably a lot of great kind of you train yourself to look out for what is truly newsworthy, right? And so I'd love to hear from you what you've kind of taken from your newspaper days in terms of identifying a story that is going to resonate with people versus these other kind of just filler stories that you're talking about.
one of the key lessons I learned, I think, was from a really, really absolutely horrible guy who I worked for. Uh, re- recently, recently got turfed out in a really amusing sex scandal, which I won't go into here. He he was just an absolutely filthy pig of a man. But he gave me this advice, which I think is as relevant today, and it is that if the article you are writing, if the information in it can be found through a Google search, it should not be in the newspaper. It should You should be aiming to introduce new information into the world, whether that is from speaking to interviewing people, whether that is from getting information from other sources. But if it's from on a Google search, that there is no reason for you to be the intermediary there. And I still believe that's true. And I mean, the funny thing is that in the old newspaper days, I mean, it's so weird to think of this, but whereas now everything is measured in clicks, the success was measured when there weren't clicks. Success was measured in how many people ripped off your story. So if if you got a newsline out of somebody, or a newsline from whatever, and then it was picked up by loads of other publications, that was seen as the most valuable thing you could get. And so, I mean, a really stupid one that I did, we we did an interview with David Beckham. This must have been 20 years ago, and he we were having a very, very tense face off with people about it, and it ended up we kind of got done over. They ran some stuff that our exclusivity agreement shouldn't have happened, and that meant we were able to dip into the copy that we weren't supposed to publish. They had copy approval, and so we were able to publish the newsline that David Beckham was struggling with Brooklyn's maths homework when he was 7. That immediately got picked up by, I think, 3,500 publications worldwide. Because I mean, I have to say, it was one of these ones where it faced off, and they kind of broke another newspaper broke our exclusive, and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to get fired here. But then we were able to turn it around, and this was this sort of mega global gossip story. It and that thing of being, being the source of new information was the value of your publication. I think that's sort of slightly been lost in this world, because these days I think one of the most abused words in the English language in 2026 is exclusive, because it's just, I mean, it's slapped onto bloody everything, and it.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. I mean, again, one of our research pieces found that was the subject line, including that in your subject line is what got the most engagement. And it makes sense. But I think to your other point too, This idea like moving away from clicks, right? Like because AI is starting to take a lot of these clicks away. I do think or hope, I guess I should say, that newspapers are moving towards more of a like curated readership kind of like we want to, build an audience that is unique to the
Yeah.
Telegraph or unique to, in which case maybe you do start having writers write in different ways. But I mean, I would hope, yeah, that core idea of writing things that nobody else can find otherwise is going to be key. I mean, that was always the way that we tell people to write in now. I mean, that's how I write stuff on BuzzStream. It's like, what can't you find out on with a simple ChatGPT search, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you need to find. And I think that is why people have gravitated towards the expert commentary thing. But I mean, outside of that, does that to you, is it just data? Like that sounds like probably like unique proprietary data is probably a good place for people to go.
In terms of sort of what driving.
Sorry. I'm switching here. Like, say you are a PR person, you're trying to get coverage, trying to pitch to a journalist with this
Hmm.
idea that, you want to give them a story that is something that can't be found on Google or can't be found on AI. Where are people go? Should people be thinking about for stories?
I would say that stuff that's never gets old is genuine expertise, and ideally, you've got a person who has expertise in a niche space. I think that research where it's, it doesn't feel contrived and it is relevant to an industry audience, that stuff never gets old. I think that, like, for instance, let's just say finance and stuff like that, there's been a big shift away from your traditional business reporting, like, your funding rounds and stuff like that, and towards more personal finance where it's focused on the consumer. So if you've got a guy who is willing to offer that kind of advice to the consumer, then that's always valuable as well. So it's just a question of seeing stuff where, meeting newspapers where they are today, not where they were 10 years ago, and sort of, because these days so much bandwidth is focused on stuff like Google Discover, where the stuff that resonates is highly consumer focused. I mean, it's kind of trashy a lot of the time, but it is highly focused on, consumer needs and stuff. And it's about thinking yourself into that food chain. How can I deliver advice that is, you know, the old, as the old saying goes, news you can use, or that
Hmm.
sort of, consumer advice and stuff like that. It's, I think that it's a question of looking at, the volume of what a publisher is doing and, working yourself into that chain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great insight. I mean, is that something that you do when you are pitching to maybe a new publisher? Is this
Yeah.
idea of yeah, like to walk us through that, like understanding, how to pitch to an editor at a new publisher.
I mean, before I'd pitch somebody, I mean, I'm lucky being quite ancient that most of the time I just wait for people to call me because
Right. I guess
I've,
flip it, right? Like if you weren't, right.
but no, but I do it. And what I do is if I'm, because, yeah, a friend of mine got a very senior job on a newspaper in the UK. And I was like, okay, well, and he's a good friend. We both worked for the horrible pig that I was describing earlier. And, when you've suffered together in the trenches like that, we were like, I got a very, very senior job. So what I did was I bought that newspaper every day for a week and read the whole thing every day for a week and went, okay, what sort of stuff do they run? So if I'm doing something online, I would do what I'd look at it over the course of, news cycles go in weeks. So it's like often, for instance, I find that people tend to overlook the opportunities that people do at the weekend because a lot of news sites are very, very different at the weekend when there's less actual news. So there's no, for instance, there's no like science press releases go live over the weekend except for the ones on Sunday night for Monday morning. Oh, big company announcements tend to happen at that point. Politics tends to slow down, so you've got more of a run at the front page. So most of the sites, they tend to run their more slightly out there interviews or feature pieces over the course of the weekend. And that's so if you're going to, target something that isn't part of the news cycle, which is what I would often do, because it's like as a freelancer, they've already got guys who target everything that's in the news cycle. So I need to find stuff. And so I would just look at what those kind of outlier pieces that they run. It's whether that's an interview with somebody who's had a kind of crazy experience, or an interview with somebody who's doing good, or launching a new project, or a sort of highly controversial figure who might say something outrageous or whatever like that, and then you can pitch in interview pieces and get in there.
Is there something that you specifically like once you have a story idea, how do you kind of pare down what do you think is going to be the true hook? Like what is going to make it resonate with the readers?
When I pitch editors, I always just pitch the eventual headline, because that is how newspapers operate. And most of the guys I'm pitching are kind of either newspaper or ex-newspaper. They've done their time in the trenches. So every newspaper runs on the list. And the list is a list of headlines that have been approved by the editor, and where you think you've got a chance of delivering something that matches that line. So you, you know, uh, let's say it's an expert piece. It would be like, I'm a Bitcoin expert. Here's why the time to buy Bitcoin is now, or something like that. Let's say, or, uh, something like that. And you've got to pare it down to that point where it's the list line. And then, these days, a lot of newspapers use Trello or Airtable or stuff like that, but it's still, and that's it's for technical reasons, so that they can integrate various tech tools into that, like you can create pieces, add pictures, etc., etc. But the list is still the thing that is powering it. It's just you work through that list, and so to get on the list, you've got to have a headline that sounds like the stuff on the list. So you've got to boil it down to whatever the headline is. If you've done an interview, you you I mean, you think to yourself, okay, that's the line. Because before the internet stuff, if you did an interview, honestly, you wouldn't have switched your tape recorder off, and your editor would always already be on your phone going, "What's the line?" And you're expected to have boiled it down to that
Yeah.
one line. I had this hilarious experience where I was interviewing an AI expert this year, and and this is, I'm saying this to illustrate that publicists are often instrumental in creating very good lines. But I was interviewing this AI expert. I've forgotten his name, but he's a very famous AI doomer. And he, we were on video, and he said that he estimated that a child born today has more of a chance of being killed by AI than they have of graduating high school. And the thing was that when he said that, I saw the publicist just doing a little love heart emoji, and I was like, "Yeah, you guys have talked about that one before."
Yeah.
If you get that line, and then that goes onto the list, then you're in.
Right. Right. I mean, this process you're talking about, though, I guess, I mean, it is highly kind of targeted. You are really digging into the individual writers that you're pitching, the publisher. You're understanding how they write, how they cover things. For a majority, I don't want to generalize, but there are plenty of agencies out there, and especially in the agency model, with this idea of digital PR coming out of link building, this idea that you got to get as many links as you can, so you got to cast the net as wide as possible. So they are trying to, and it's getting better, but I think there's still always going to be this mindset of like the scaled approach. I'm going to write one headline or
Mhm.
one template that's going to work 10 publishers, 10 different newspapers, say. Does that, based on what you're saying, that just does not seem like it's the right way to do it.
Well, but I probably have a slight, like, I am not a sort of young, youngish journalism graduate who is working in a sort of content mill where they're producing dozens of articles a day. So if you're, I'm kind of an outlier in that I write predominantly kind of, well, I mean, that's not always the case, but I sort of write stuff that's meant to be a little bit more in depth and worked on. Whereas I think that with, digital publishers who are publishing really large numbers of stuff per day, that headline that goes across every publisher can still resonate if it's the kind of thing that those publishers often publish.
But again, you still have to kind of connect to that publisher. I guess that's what I'm getting at is like, I just find more and more my answers when people talk about this stuff just goes back to like, you gotta just be more targeted than you're being. You gotta look at what the journalist has written, how they are writing, how they're formatting your stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're like maybe it is doable, but you're not putting yourself in the right position to succeed, right?
Yeah,
The best
I mean,
position.
I'd agree with that. I think that having that degree of literacy in what publications do and what journalists do is highly useful. You've got to understand the publication. You've got to understand what it is, who reads it, how they reach their readers. And once you understand that, you can start to work out a way to be in that food chains. You know, there's there is a certain subset of stories that will work, across British publications, across, you know, a certain subset of popular publishers in the UK. And, there are other stories where, you'd be best off going to one, offering it to them, and then everyone else will pick it up once it's run.
Right. All right. I want to kind of end with this last question to put yourself in the shoes of digital PR agency. You're starting the Rob Waugh digital PR agency. What are a couple just kind of key things you would implement for success now? It can be pitching, it can be building a team, it can be whatever. I just kind of want to, you've been in this space for so long now and in both sides. I feel like you'll have a unique way to answer this question.
I think that media literacy and understanding is just absolutely vital. When I used to work on papers, it was expected that you would have read every newspaper before you came into work. And that's a lot of newspapers. And I found that discipline of having, I'd buy one lot before I got the bus, skim through those, and then I'd buy a second lot on the way into the tube, the underground railway in London. And so I would have got through them all because my editor would just jump on anybody she thought might not have read every single piece. In The weird thing was that when I started doing it, I thought this is just such a weird and pointless thing to do. But actually, the understanding that you get of each publication from doing that is enormously beneficial and a lasting thing. So it sort of helps you get into the ethos of the brands that you're dealing with. And I think that in terms of if I was building a digital PR agency before, I think I'm going to I'll go with a boomer and Gen Xer answer here, which is that I'd hire experience because I think that I write copy for various PR agencies and have worked in there. I sometimes feel like there's a lot of people who are doing the actual grunt work who don't really have a terribly much understanding about what they're actually doing. They're doing the sort of mechanical parts of it. And I think that in some cases, at least, you need a bit of, you need a bit of cunning. You need a bit of sort of thinking backwards, sort of really sort of digesting and digging into what you're doing, or just that kind of instinct, like, Jesus Christ, these guys are never going to run this. And uh, that basically comes with a couple of gray hairs.
Yeah, or at least maybe a consultant or two, who has
Yeah.
been in there, right, to lead the way. Yeah, I totally agree with that last point, especially. I've said that a few times on this podcast where it's like, I feel like any of the agencies who are not kind of actively kind of consulting journalists, I think you're at a disservice. And it's funny because you talk to the people who do kind of pitch internationally, they're maybe a UK based agency, but they pitch in Italy and Greece and whatever, they have clients there. They are hiring people who are native to that country to help formulate the pitches and do, some of that ideation work. And it's like, because they know the nuances. And so like there's no reason why you shouldn't have a journalist insight if you're pitching to a journalist to get their insights, and they understand the nuances. And so yeah, I really love that. All right, Rob, I want to let you go. What video game should people be playing right now? Is it Diablo 4?
Well, to be honest, I'm being very rarely unfaithful to Diablo 4 at the minute, and I've taken the radical step of moving to Diablo 2 Resurrected. So I think you should all get on that.
All right, you hear it here, folks.
Okay. That was
Rob,
been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. People can find your work on Press Gazette, Daily Mail, all over the place. What I'm going to do is in the comments, I'm going to share a handful of in the show notes, share a handful of recent articles. Is LinkedIn the best place to connect with you if people have questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
I kind of missed the boat on Twitter, and now I've just about because it really was huge about 12 years ago, and I was like, I should have really made the effort there. So I thought, I've been on LinkedIn since about the dawn of time and had quite a lot of followers already. So I thought I'm actually going to try and do LinkedIn. Yeah,
you're not missing anything on Twitter. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, and thanks, listeners, for checking it out. If you have any questions about this stuff, leave in the comments. I'll make sure to connect you with Rob. I'm sure he can get on to answer it. So good luck out there, everyone. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.